This week's episode of our show has been sponsored by Grim Hollow, the dark fantasy campaign setting created by Ghostfire Gaming.
If you like classic monsters, gothic horror, and gritty adventures, then Grim Hollow might be the right setting for you. And now, available on the Ghostfire Gaming store, you can get all 3 of the Grim Hollow books. They have the campaign guide, which is a full guide to the world of Arathis and all of the horrors that are within.
There's also the player's guide that not only does it have a whole bunch of new subclasses, including 6 written by yours truly, there are also rules for transforming into a monster, so you can become a werewolf or a lich or a vampire as a player character.
If you need a ton of classic monsters to fill out your campaigns with, whether or not you're playing in the world of Grim Hollow, they also have their Monster Grimoire, which is packed with a ton of new monsters to bring to 5th edition.
The Grim Hollow setting is wonderful if you loved that double dose of dark fantasy in your D&D, and with a complete suite of books to support the world of Arathis or to use in your own dark fantasy campaign settings, there is lots to look forward to in the setting. So check out all the books, which are available now in both physical format and PDF at the Ghostfire Gaming store by following the links in the description below.
And now, onto this week's episode.
Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for GMs.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we're taking a look at 5 underrated feats that we really love in D&D 5e, but don't often come up in a lot of conversation, and characters often don't consider them.
These underrated feats can actually be pretty game-changing in the right campaign or on the right character with the right abilities. There's a lot of cases that people don't consider when looking at these feats. They may not be able to compare to things like Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter or Polearm Master or any of those iconic feats that we know can really be game-changing. But we have seen these feats in our own games, and they have done wonders for the players using them.
There's a lot to discuss, so let's dive in.
So jumping right into it, the first feat that I want to talk about is one that the player in our live stream, Joe, has done a wonderful job showcasing how amazing it can be, and that is the actor feat. Oddly enough, I've seen the actor feat on several people's worst feats in D&D list.
It's pretty good and surprisingly decent in terms of its application because it hits on something that is quite potent. It does pack along a +1 bonus to your charisma score, meaning that it is a nice, easy pickup for a bard, a warlock, a rogue, or a sorcerer, or even a paladin who just wants to round up their charisma score from a 19 to a 20 or something like that. But then the extra features that it comes along with give you advantage on charisma deception checks to pass yourself off as another person and allow you to mimic the speech patterns of other people extremely accurately, meaning that it requires a insight check for someone to determine that you're doing it. This combination, alongside several other class features and spells that are very common to bards, warlocks, and sorcerers, really make this feat part of a really powerful engine that is useful in interaction, infiltration, and role-playing scenarios.
Right away, I'm going to bring up the fact that warlocks have an invocation, Mask of Many Faces, really useful that allows them to cast Disguise Self at will. And even if you're not a warlock taking Mask of Many Faces, bards love Disguise Self. Sorcerers sometimes love Disguise Self. And I think that pairing Disguise Self with the actor feat dials the whole thing up to 11, and just in those 2 things alone, actor feat, Disguise Self, you are now playing the master of disguises. Rogues and many other classes that gain a lot of tool proficiencies can gain proficiency in a disguise kit. Again, not even using magic, but the simple application of a disguise kit and the actor feat allow incredible infiltration tactics. Perfect for the character who wants to do the more Mission Impossible style infiltration rather than the sneaking in the shadows. The Mission Impossible, I'm talking about how many costumes and disguises they always use. There's always the person who pulls the face off halfway through a scene and you're like, they were that person all along. I love those bits. And playing that in D&D is as easy as an actor feat and a spell or a disguise kit.
My favorite strategy that this feat really helps make reliable and powerful is the strategy where the player characters capture a lieutenant or low-level minion of a foe and then have one of their characters impersonate that individual and bring the rest of the party into the enemy base as prisoners. And I've seen this executed several times across several campaigns. It's a classic trope of just television and action movies in general. You've seen it. Probably as I describe it, you're already thinking of like 3 or 4 different TV shows or movies that have done this exact same thing. And it's wonderful, and it's great to see the player characters pull it off. The next feat that we're going to look at was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and this is the Crusher feat. It adds +1 to your strength score, and it also adds a rider effect that when you crit an enemy with a bludgeoning weapon, attack rolls against that enemy now have advantage. And finally, it also means that once per turn, when you hit an enemy with a bludgeoning weapon, you can move them 5 feet. This is a very nice package that is easy to slip in to so many character builds.
If you have any character that's dealing bludgeoning damage, if you're playing a fighter, a barbarian, a paladin, really anybody who's getting up close and personal, this is actually a great feat to pair with any spellcaster that's also in your party who's dropping down AoE effects. Being able to stand on the outskirts of an AoE effect and smack people 5 feet back into it, just making it a little harder for them to get out. Even the ability of protection here, of maybe you see that there's a really bad enemy who has your sorcerer pinned. The ability to run up and smack them 5 feet away and then move yourself in between them and the person you're protecting. The ability to move a creature 5 feet has so many applications. I could keep listing them all day, but it's just so good.
And it requires absolutely no action from you to execute. It's just part of making the attack, making it really nice to use in combination with other moves such as pushes, shoves, and grabs. But the critical effect is icing on the cake. Causing your allies to have advantage on attack rolls against an enemy that you score a critical hit against is a great way to set off the final finishing moves for the rest of your party. I love this feat, and I think that characters using hammers and mauls and clubs is really cool and a great archetype. And I think that a lot more characters can consider it because, hey, this is one that you can pair with Great Weapon Master if you want to.
You know that classic, I want to say I see it in anime a lot, the anime trope where the big hit gets landed, but then the circle of heroes are just punching the bad guy around. I feel like that's like the paladin coming in with their maul, critting with a smite, and then the rest of the people are just smacking that enemy till they're dead. I love Crusher. Now, one of my favorite underrated feats is the mobile feat. Now, the mobile feat made the list of honorable mentions in our top feats video, but I think it's worth mentioning again because it doesn't get talked about enough. Mobile allows you to add 10 feet to your movement distance. When you take the dash action, you ignore the penalties of difficult terrain, and when you would normally provoke an opportunity attack against a creature that you have attacked that turn, you get to ignore that. You just get to run away. I took this feat on my monk, and I know that we rag on monks a lot here, but a monk should probably always take the mobile feat. That turns their skirmishing ability, the ability to get in, punch, 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 get back out, really exceptional. As a matter of fact, one of my arguments, I'm going to continue to rag on the monk, I think the mobile feat should be baked into the base class, but it's a must-have for monks and for any character that isn't a frontliner but is still a melee combatant.
I also think that rogues benefit tremendously from mobile because it builds on top of what they already get with cunning action, allowing you to really strategically decide when you're going to dash or disengage, and giving you even more options for how to navigate around that. I even think that there's characters that normally you don't associate them with that mobility, but that would benefit from this. Like, I can imagine a barbarian taking mobile and using the mobile feat as if it was a better charger feat, because it's going to allow you to smash someone out of the way and move on to the next target, and or navigate around a bunch of minions if you need to and get where you need to go, and it will stack with your faster movement speeds.
There are a lot of barbarian subclasses that actually have little benefits that pair well with mobile. I'm thinking again of the Totem Warrior. There's a few totem choices that if you think of pairing them with mobile, they're great. I even think fighters can benefit from the ability to maneuver into the right place at the right time. If they need to back up a bit or try to lure the enemy towards them, being able to hit a big enemy and then move back. There's so many different ways that this comes into play. And I really just think that maneuverability on the battlefield is a really useful tool. Being where you need to be can change the entire combat encounter.
So the next feat that we think is actually pretty underrated, and it's a really cool feat for just getting so much more out of a bunch of cantrips and spells in the game, is Spell Sniper. This feat allows you to choose a cantrip from a class's spell list, but it also allows your spells that require attack rolls to double their range and ignore half and 3/4 cover. It's basically the sharpshooter for cantrips. But it's really worth noting that there are a ton of cantrips in D&D 5e that are really low range, and increasing their range using this feat adds a bunch of an interesting utility to them in unexpected ways.
Yeah, there are spells out there that the range makes you have to get really up close and personal. And for most spellcasters, you don't want to be up close and personal. Adding just double the range is probably the first thing that people think of with this feat, and I think that it's a great option. But also, gaining a cantrip from any spell list really opens up the possibilities for any spellcaster to grab something they couldn't normally get. And I think that the amount of times, even in our own games, that we've had to remember the fact that Sharpshooter just ignores cover other than full cover. Having that on spell attacks is really amazing. You get to really stand on the back lines where you want to be if you're a sorcerer or a wizard. Most warlocks, bards, most of these primary spellcasters don't want to get into the fray if they don't have to, and Spell Sniper just shores up all the things that you need to not get mixed up in the enemy's way.
I think this pairs with the fact that people forget cover is a thing that exists. And often it isn't factored in to many combat encounters if people are forgetting that it is a thing and that people can take cover and increase their armor class and their AC. And also, by and large, there's not a lot of spells outside of cantrips that require attack rolls. A few of the cantrips that I think are really, really interesting with this feat in particular are the Druid cantrip, Thorn Whip,
Yeah.
and, of course, Booming Blade, along with pole arms or reach weapons.
I even think that it's an iconic choice for warlocks just for their Eldritch Blast.
It is. And in fact, you don't have to be a druid, a warlock, or a class with access to Booming Blade to grab Spell Sniper to pick this up and start using it. So, well, oftentimes I think that the grab a cantrip is Magic Initiate overshadows this. There's certain cantrips, again, like Thorn Whip and Booming Blade, where if your character wants to get that cantrip, this might be a better option than Magic Initiate.
Because you're gaining the added benefits as well that are going to apply to all of your attack spells.
Yes.
And again, I personally, as a DM, I use cover all the time. And the funny thing is, I only seem to use it against the character that has Sharpshooter.
Me too.
And so every time that I'm like, my Artificer has Sharpshooter in my campaign, and we're not talking about Sharpshooter, but the same rules apply here, that they seem to be the only one that they're like, I'm going to shoot that person who's behind 5 other people behind the tree. And I'm like, I'm going to give them +5 to their AC, you fool. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, I ignore cover. And I'm like, oh, never mind. You shoot through everybody.
Yeah.
But that's such a beautiful thing. And a warlock with Eldritch Blast, you can just snipe people. The ability to use Thorn Whip at a greater distance, the Booming Blade having 10-foot range, is just interesting. Because now, with the Polearm Master who has Booming Blade, there's so many ways that Spell Sniper, I think, doesn't come up enough. And we usually don't talk about it because it's getting overshadowed by the potential of something like Sharpshooter. But this is really the Sharpshooter Great Weapon Master without the damage increase. But this is that for spellcasters, in a way. The last feat that we come to is another one made famous by Joe, who plays in our game. Joe has a knack for picking feats that we're like, why are you picking that feat? And then shows us why he picks them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this other one, the final one that we're going to talk about is Shield Master. Now, Shield Master we think is underrated because it does get overshadowed. It's not anybody's first pick. But seeing it in play, it has saved our fighter's life on multiple occasions, allowed them to protect people. It basically, in a way, was equivalent to what we thought Dungeon Delvers should be doing. But Joe got to just throw his shield up against traps that were shooting fire at him all the time and do all sorts of shenanigans that really helped him mitigate damage and deal with issues. Not to mention the amount of times that he's just knocked a bad guy prone, helping everybody out or stopping them from getting to one of the squishier characters.
Shieldmaster got a little bit of a hit against it because Jeremy Crawford ruled on Twitter that the feat has to be used to knock someone prone or shove them as a bonus action after taking the attack action and could not be used before taking the attack action. So as a result of this ruling, which you're free to rule differently at your table, it really diminishes the flexibility of the feat because you can't do this strategy where as a fighter you shove someone to knock them prone, then attack them with advantage with the rest of your attacks, which is a pretty sweet combo all on its own. But even still with that ruling in effect, the battlefield control brought by Shieldmaster to a sword and board fighter, especially one that pairs Shieldmaster with Crusher. Mwah! It's like a fine wine. Just knocking enemies around, moving them around, having that additional capacity, even combining that with Battlemaster maneuvers and other battlefield presence sort of things, it really does add a lot of that counter mobility and kind of chess master play to a fighter that works every round. So the fact that this feat has this offensive battlefield control aspect combined with the defensive attributes of the feat, it's really good. It just, you have to be of the sword and board style, which, again, people want to use their crossbows and their polearms, and I guess we're guilty of promoting that, but the sword and board style is super cool too.
Sometimes you just want to play the classic knight with a sword and shield, as Joe did when he joined our campaign. I remember Joe bringing his character to our game and saying, I'm going to play a human fighter with a sword and shield.
Yeah.
And we both were like, really?
It's like, Joe, have you seen Great Weapon Master?
Like, have you seen D&D? You can be anything in the world and you're going to be that? And then he's like, yes, and I'm going to take the Shield Master feat. And we were all like, okay, man, have fun. And just over time, he's just proven fighters are cool. Human fighters are cool. Human fighters with swords and shield are cool. Human fighters with swords and shield who take Shield Master are really cool. And so I think that we can give Joe a lot of props for teaching us the benefits of Shield Master and showcasing them time and time again in our own campaigns.
Now, we could go on for much longer about all the other feats that have to live in the shadow of the amazing feats that made our top 10 list, like Great Weapon Master, Sharpshooter, Lucky, Alert, all those other good ones. But we're definitely finding as we build more and more characters for D&D 5e, we play more and more campaigns, we're often reaching for these underrated and interesting feats that turn out to be surprisingly potent and really, really good, especially when used together. So we would love to hear from you what other feats you feel are underrated, what ones that you've had amazing success with in D&D 5e, and which ones that you are considering for making your next character, but maybe want to get the word out on how good it could be.
So let us know your favorite underrated feats and which ones have really surprised you and brought your characters to life in interesting ways in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube and want to show your support for the channel, please consider becoming a patron of our work by following the links in the description below.
And don't forget to check out our live play where we use some interesting feats in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more guides to the feats and spells of D&D 5e right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.